Welcome back to Delfino Square. Last week we got a pretty cool forest set up, to which some of you guys went, no! To which I'm gonna go, well, too bad. But some of you forest deniers had some pretty good criticisms, like the fact that from an aerial view, this forest is gonna look more like an outcropping of disillusioned polygons, or the fact that this forest has nary a rock nor boulder. And chiefly among the concerns is that removing all of the buildings in this section makes the track feel too open. So let's fix that. But also, surprise, this is probably the last episode. Now before you leave to go angrily eat a pretzel sandwich, I'm not necessarily done with this track. And I'm certainly not done with videos like these, or series like this one. But October is here and I'd rather not spend the whole spooky season trying to make marginal improvements to this track. But I think it would be really cool to come back to this track next month, and maybe do a few videos trying to actually mod it into Mario Kart 8, and sort of learn that process a little bit more. That way I could reliably mod my revamps in. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see in November. I think it sounds pretty fun. Anyways, that brings us to this week's goal, to get Delfino Square into a passable final rendition, something that I can work with when the modding part comes around. And as you can see, I've already gotten some trees out of the way and put a few buildings down. I'm hoping this will remedy the excess openness without taking too much away from the forest. And actually, before I did any of that, I made some changes to the dirt path. This probably shouldn't sit 2 feet above the grass. Some of you suggested extruding a curve to make this path instead, which probably would have been easier. But we've got this path, so we might as well see what we can do with it. I selected the lateral loops and thinned the path a little bit. That way it won't look like some kind of inaccessible shortcut. And of course, I lowered the track a bit too, and recontoured it to the ground. Well, now that the dirt path is looking better, and there are some more buildings here, let's fix those stairs. Turns out that concrete texture I chose isn't exactly a fan favorite, so let's do the mossy brick texture instead. This will add a lot more definition to each step. At least it will when I manually unwrap each step to match the seams. Now you might think, like I did, that I should instead just project the whole staircase onto the texture and line it up so that each step uses one brick. But that's actually more difficult and frustrating than doing it this way. Well, now that it's unwrapped, I can select a section of this staircase to use for the smaller ones. Alright, there's a few little details ironed out. Let's try and fix that whole thing where the forest looks like garbage from most angles. I need to cover this section entirely. The flat forest strips are really the main issue, so I just put up a row of buildings here. Then I filled this empty space with some large trees. There's a few areas that could maybe be improved, but I think this fixes most of the issue. Next up is the rocks. I got some from Hyrule Circuit, brightened the texture a bit, added some moss, and got them all set up. Well, now I can go ahead and get a render from the track perspective. I should have done this last episode, since this is pretty much the only angle the forest looks good from. Well, now we've really only got one thing left to do. Set up the rest of the building faces. I started this back in part 4, and here in part 9, it's only like 60% done. So there's gonna be quite a bit of boring moving stuff around to do. I'd love to keep working on this track for 15 or 20 parts. There's all kinds of details I still want to add, and maybe I will add some of those in November. But we're coming up on week 10 of working on this, and I think it's best we find somewhere to wrap this up. But don't worry, this is just the beginning of these kinds of projects. Seeing how much some of you enjoy tuning in every week really makes me want to focus on this. But that does mean moving on to new projects and learning from previous ones. Like for example, I think I need to pick something smaller next time. Maybe do some battle courses or something. Projects that will hopefully be easier to plan and keep relatively clean. And by relatively clean, I mean the project will be smaller, therefore the mess will be smaller. So relatively, it'll be clean. I actually have a battle course in specific that I do want to revamp this month. Something that fits the spooky theme and should be very fun. Looking back on previous years on my channel, I want to capture as much of that essence as I can in this type of video, but that's going to take some experimenting, so bear with me. Well, there we have it. The building faces are finally on at last. Now I don't want this to feel like an unsatisfying ending to the track, because it's not over. I'm planning on doing one big video that goes over the whole project so far, to sort of catch everyone up before doing the modding. But I've got some other ideas for this month. Some of it might be a little less Blender/Mario Kart focused, but there's definitely going to be a couple videos that'll be just like this series. Anyways, I really appreciate you watching. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.